Hello, Bearfax community. Well, as I've already discussed, we're now going to a fortnightly schedule just because we can't keep up with our guests' scheduling and we need to give them a little more time. So you're just going to have to wait an extra week, but it's always worth that extra wait. Extraordinary is the word that we use for the podcast, and we've had lots of extraordinary people. People also get put in extraordinary situations. And at the start of 2020, I don't normally like to go political, but I'd like to say dictator, not premier, put us in a situation where I think businesses, particularly small businesses, were brought to their knees and some have never recovered. Many have. And the lady that I'm talking to today has run a business for quite some time and survived COVID and dictator Dan's measures and come out the other side. Georgina Stayches from Fetching Communications. Thanks for joining the Bearfax today.
Lovely to be here.
Where are we at the moment, Georgina? We're normally in Melbourne. Where are you at the moment?
We're in Apia in Samoa.
Lovely. A much-earned break?
Yes. Working in events, you kind of find little windows that you can escape between events. So the window happened to fall now. So my partner and I got away for about 10 days and head back on a 6 a.m. flight tomorrow.
Back for all the spring events.
Yes. Yep. And planning for next year.
Okay.
We
so
do a lot of that.
Give us a quick overview of Fetching Communications. What sort of business are you and what do you do?
So we've been going for nearly 14 years in event management, communications, volunteer management, mainly working with community groups, associations, not-for-profits. So really in that community sector, and we do anything from conferences to awards nights, university graduations. We do the Bastille Day French Festival, where we just recently had 30,000 come over 2 days. So a real range of things, but we say we work with the community for the community.
How hard is it to get these events put together? All the spinning parts?
It's hard, but it's what I do. So I love it. Events is overwhelming and people always shudder when they hear the word events or if they've had to be involved. But I think that's because a lot of people get thrown into events without the skill set and the training. And it can be daunting because, you can't push a deadline out if you're not ready. So it's a lot of work, but I love it. And I love the variety. I love the people that we work with. We only choose organisations that we really believe in. So we're very passionate about each cause and community that we work with. So yeah, it's full on, and it is a kind of industry that has a lot of highs and lows. You're full on, then you're quiet, then you're full on, then you're quiet. So you do have to get ready to ride that roller coaster.
And how many staff do you have, or does that fluctuate depending on events?
It fluctuates. So a lot of the time it's me, and then I bring people on. But this year we got up to about 8 staff, just because the volume of our work has grown so much this year. Now it's fluctuated. We're back to about 3, and then it'll ramp up again when the next events start to kick off.
So we'll go back to 2020 and the dreaded coronavirus starts its spread. When did things stop for you?
So we knew things were starting, I think, far before anyone else because of the tourism and events industry overseas. So I remember going to a Victorian Tourism Industry Council event mid-February, and there was talk about expos and conferences overseas that had been cancelled. So we knew, and the Chinese tourism industry had been halted when flights from China were stopped. So we kind of knew. I remember when the rule for events over 500 people being banned came in, and I was all set to go to an event about the ban on events over 500 people. And then, of course, it just started to snowball. And I remember I work in a co-working space, and I can remember the moment where I thought, this is it, like we're really, it's happening. and going to some colleagues in an office next door who don't work in events and bursting into tears and saying, that's it, my business is over. And they were kind of oblivious to everything going on. So I think the tourism and events industry, we saw it happening overseas. We saw it coming. We were the first impacted, or one of the first, and we were the last really to come back. So it was oh yeah.
No, go ahead.
I remember a day in mid-March, and we were doing a lot of scenario planning when we thought it was going to be a case of speakers not being able to come to Australia. So we had all these contingencies, and then we realised the events were going to cancel. And I think I cancelled about 12 events in one day in March. But it's funny, you talk about the government rules that came in, and I know a lot of event people were very anti the rules. But what we needed to actually listen to was our audience. They didn't want to go to events. They didn't feel safe.
Yeah.
And I know I sat in many forums where event people were like, events have got to come back, events have got to come back, But what they were doing were trying to solve their problem. It was always about our audience. And until our audience felt comfortable to come back, I was never going to shout from the rooftops, events have got to come back. So it was, there are a lot of nuances, I think, in how we needed to talk to our audience and our clients. And each one was very different. I work with one organisation where a lot of their supporters have had a type of cancer, so their immune systems are obviously compromised. Their event was one of the last ones that came back, even when, life was back into full swing, just because of that type of audience. Others, were a bit more eager to come back. So it really depended on the audience.
So what was the lowest point?
Look, it was wiping everything off my diary. And it wasn't only that, I was constantly writing, cancelled because of COVID. We were giving ticket refunds back. I couldn't escape it. So I just felt like every day I was in this COVID hole. And then I remember talking to a friend, and she actually came into the office before we went into lockdown. And we went, okay, what have we got to do? And we looked at, I think we planned up to about August, and we looked at each month and what my clients would be going through and we called it sort of the state of play, and what we would need to do and what help they would need. And once I kind of got over that, I mean, there are a lot of lows the whole way through, but once I got over that and sort of got an action plan, I could concentrate on that. And I have to say, I've even though I wasn't running events, I've never worked so hard during 2020 and 2021, just trying to keep things moving so that we would be ready and, our name would be out there when things came back.
So sorry to sound crass, but like everything's shut down. So where's the money coming from? Like you're a business owner, you've got expenses.
The government, yeah. So I never expected any government assistance. I thought, if I was a farmer and I had a shocking season, I wouldn't necessarily get grants. So, I sort of looked at it, well, this is, just the perils of running your own business. I turned to online events. So I did run some online events there was other little projects we were working on, but other than that, JobKeeper. But, that was a massive help. But that was, I think it worked out to be, say, $33,000 a year. And I had people, comments made to me like, well, you're getting JobKeeper. I was like saying, can you live on $33,000 a year? And it was interesting, I remember coming out of COVID, I had friends buying holiday homes, putting pools in, with all the money they had saved. And I had a completely different experience. We were, not knowing whether we were going to be able to afford our rent. It was that kind of thing. But, if the worst thing that happened to us was we had to move back with our parents, we're in a pretty lucky position. So, we knew we were much better off than a lot of other people, and we were very grateful for that.
How did you cope mentally?
Not good to start with. I remember I sat in on a webinar with an amazing, she's more than a psychologist, Dr. Amy Silver. I'd never met her. I just came across this webinar, and she talked through what our brains were doing while we were making certain decisions, our fear, and that kind of saved me and went, okay, this is normal the way I'm feeling. there were things that I had to do, really basic things. If I didn't walk in the morning, I was cactus for the rest of the day. I had to reduce sugar in my diet, and I have a lot of sugar because my mental health just deteriorated. I think I've never had to acknowledge my emotions and my mental state as much as I did. So I could tell the way I reacted to situations, and it wasn't necessarily the situation, but it was the way I was. So I kind of removed myself, from conversations, from friends, knowing that my mental health wasn't great. One of the hardest things was everyone trying to help. So I constantly had people saying, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And while it's very well-intentioned, what it does to someone is make you feel like you've not done enough and you haven't tried.
Yep.
And I remember the best thing that was said to me by two amazing women in my CWA. I can remember it was Christmas 2020, and they said, how are you doing? And I get very emotional when I think about this. And I said, it's really tough. And they said, if you need to cry, we'll cry with you. And that's all I needed. I just needed people to go, gee, it's tough. Don't try and solve it. Just acknowledge it's tough. But, it's tough, but there's a lot of tougher things in life. So it was almost just going back to basics, watching TV shows that would make me laugh, not putting too much pressure on myself, trying to keep a routine. I got, dressed every day, put makeup on, put my hair on. I think once in the whole 2 years of lockdowns, I sat at my desk in active wear, but I got ready as if I was going to work. And I sat at that desk and I worked, from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m, running webinars, doing what I could to not only keep the business going, but also just keep my mental health and myself in a routine.
Tell me about something else you did.
Well, so living Bayside, half of our 5-kilometre bubble got absorbed by the bay. And I can remember it was August 2021, and a friend said, so, for those in Melbourne, one of the coldest parts of winter, and a friend said, let's go for a swim in the bay. Now, I've lived, in that area for 15 years, and I actually rarely go to the beach. I think because it's there, I take it for granted. And I went, okay, because we had nothing else to do. And we never would have started bay swimming if it hadn't been for lockdown. So her and I went down. 2 other friends started coming down, but of course we could only exercise in groups of 2. So we'd sort of be the 2 groups of 2 a little bit far apart in the water. And I can honestly say that cold water swimming saved us. We didn't do it because it was cold water swimming. We didn't know the benefits of cold water swimming. We were just looking for something different that kind of would distract us. And we'd float around. We didn't swim out to markers or anything. We'd put our head under and we'd float and bob around for about half an hour in the bay. And then we'd go up and get our coffee. We'd be freezing. And we did that nearly every day in lockdown. And it was the combination of the friendship and that cold water therapy that definitely kept us going. And of course, now we know a lot more.
Sorry, so break it down for me. What did it actually do for you? So it's a sense of community. What did it do for you mentally and physically?
Look, this sounds a bit corny, but I can literally feel the anxiety wash away when I walk into cold water. I'm not a good summer swimmer. So as soon as that water gets warm, I'm not really interested in going down. It's got to be, do you know what? It needed to be cold and it needed to be rough, which I know sounds funny for the bay. I'm not interested in a flat, warm bay in January. I need cold and rough in August and September. Because it was a sense of mindfulness. If I needed to concentrate on the waves, then it took my mind couldn't wander to other things. It was the connection with nature too. And I remember one of the friends that I swam with saying that people had said to her, once you start swimming in the bay, you'll notice things. We would notice the bay change every day. Just hearing the bird sounds, the sound of the waves, things that we just never concentrated on if, we were powering up and down Beaconsfield Parade, suddenly meant a lot more to us. And I've never realised how much the bay changes, from day to day. So all of that stuff was a sense of mindfulness that actually took us out of the environment that we were in because of the virus. And then, of course, the cold water, it just it wipes your mind straight away. And as I said, I can almost feel that anxiety wash off. And, you know, my partner's been telling me to have cold showers and cold water swim for years. And I'm like, yeah. And then, you know, of course, now I'm on the bandwagon. And there were times when he'd say, go down to the beach when I'd get home, or I'd get very stressed with something. He'd say, go down and jump in the water. And it's, you know, I can't, I just can't recommend it enough. And it really saved four people, these 4 friends during that time. And we've continued it, not as much because we're back at work and, you know, our schedules are a bit different, but it got us through.
I remember Elwood Beach during all of it, and we used to be the only ones out there swimming through winter, and there were days where it was like Burke Street, but it was an amazing community. And I know the US military, for their return servicemen, they have a surfing program for them, for their PTSD, and they measure their brainwaves. And their theory, or in basic, their theory is that they're focused so much on surviving surfing the wave that it wipes everything else. And you'd have to think that would be similar to cold water and rough water, particularly in the bay. You're just focused on that and everything else washes away.
Exactly. And that's why I'm not good when it's a perfect summer flat day, because I don't have anything to distract me. So, you know, we'd get down there on a rough day, and one of my friends called it a Georgie day if it's a really horrendous day in the bay. She goes, it was a Georgie day for you. I lose interest in summer. It really is like that mindfulness of colouring in, or, you know, any of those activities that do just focus your brain in a different way. And you know what was really funny? Every week we said, and I should say in the group, you know, we had a really strong, you know, 2 pretty strong swimmers, one who'd done a lot of corporate challenge swimming, and every day we'd say, okay, tomorrow we'll swim to the marker. Tomorrow we'll start swimming. And we never could. And the day lockdown was lifted, the next day we started swimming. So it was like our brains could sort of process one thing at a time.
Okay.
And then we could start swimming. But just that bobbing around for half an hour, you know, I mean, half the time we couldn't feel our fingers after. But it was invigorating. We felt alive. And you just, there's a mindfulness to it that none of us expected when we started doing it. We just did it because, well, nothing else to do.
So, question of preference, do you like to warm up naturally, or do you have a warm shower afterwards?
I know we're not, well, you can tell me if this is right or not. I've heard I'm not supposed to have a warm shower after. My body's supposed to warm itself up, and that by having a warm shower is not letting the body do what it's supposed to. Is that right?
Well, yes and no. If you're in there for half an hour, there's lots of benefits. So
I will say we sit and have a coffee for about an hour after. So it's a while before we get to the shower.
Yeah, no, that's all. It's all good. Getting in, look, wetsuit, no wetsuit, whatever, getting in, it's all good,
I should say we're no wetsuit and we're no swimming cap.
Okay.
It's
well,
just...
look, my friend Jim, who's an amazing swimmer who I've swum the winter rip with and I swim with regularly, I like to warm up naturally, but he likes to go home and have a warm bath and have a slice of margarita pizza. So it's personal preference, I think.
Oh, there we go. Well, look, we go to Ned's and have a, overpriced coffee. But we got better this year, I must say. Our winter wardrobe got better. We were putting thongs on and, we're much better now. We get out of our wet bathers. We used to sit in our wet bathers while we had coffee. I mean, how ridiculous. So we've got better at that over time. But yeah, I think what we don't like is to do the swim and then rush home. I think part of it is that wind down, that walk up to the coffee shop. Otherwise, you just feel like we're ticking a box. Mm-hmm. Whereas that whole, coffee conversation is part of the whole experience for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So when did things start to look up for you? Because we sort of came out, then we went back in. When did it?
Yeah. Look, it's funny. So we run, I've always said fetching events helps people run events. What COVID did, it just changed the way we helped people. So we weren't on the ground running an event, but we were mentoring, or we were writing blogs or running webinars. So that kept going. We started to get, we actually got new clients in 2020 and 2021. it dipped, it went up and down. I mean, I had one event that was rescheduled about 6 times. But really coming out of 2022, I would say. So in 2021, I knew that 2020 would be really just cancelling everything. I knew 2020 was cancelling everything. 2021 was actually going to be one of the harder years for us because we were basically going to be running all the postponed events, and we do a lot of repeat events. So we were losing a year's income, but having to run the events over 2 years. So 2021 was kind of trying to get everything back. Of course, that didn't always happen. So that moved to 2022. So 2022 and 2023 were actually harder years because we were having to rebuild, whereas 2021 was actually all the postponed events from the year before. So really last year it started to pick up, and then we felt, everyone in the industry felt this, that really end of 2021, it came back with a vengeance to the point where people couldn't cope. And I remember sitting on a webinar to New Zealand because they were about 3 months behind us, coming back and saying, myself and some other event people going, be ready because when it comes back, it's going to hit you. So we went from like a 0 to 1,000. And that was everyone. So venues, tourism operators, and that brought its own challenges. So while work was back, everyone was operating slightly differently. So it still continues to grow. Like this year's been our biggest year, I'd say, in our whole 14 years. And it's looking to repeat that and more next year. So, but we worked really hard to do that. And I remember a friend saying, you can't go dark. And there's all this research about businesses in recession, and which businesses not only survive recessions but actually bounce out of them, and they're the ones that invest in marketing. So we were someone said, you're the Johnny Walker of COVID. And there's an anecdote that Johnny Walker marketed all through the World War, even though they couldn't provide whiskey. And then once the war finished and there was pent-up demand, everyone bought Johnny Walker and they became sort of the name they are. So we had done a lot of work so that when people were ready, we came, we were there. But we also, and this is what I would say to anyone running a small business, it's not about you, it's about your clients. So we constantly looked at what our clients would need, and that's constantly changed. So when at one point they would need help in how to cancel, how to renegotiate contracts, then they would need help with understanding what their audience wanted. Then we knew that a lot of organisations were having difficulty with staffing. So we started to sort of be the contingent staff member for a lot of organisations where they had to stand down their event manager. They couldn't find a new one. So we came in and helped. So our role constantly changes and it'll continue to change. And I sort of now look back and go, think of it not that we survived COVID. We survived a disruption. And there'll be, more disruptions. There could be a financial one. Anything could happen. It's not always going to be a pandemic, but more things will come along, and you've just got to be ready and know that every year is going to be different. We haven't come back and gone, okay, right, we're back to normal. I think every year is actually going to have its own personality.
Okay, so more generally, anyone starting a business or anyone in a business, what's your advice? Give us three tidbits on how someone is to survive and keep going regardless of what the external environment's doing.
I think the first one, and there's a lot of people that talk about this, it's about solving your customer's problem, not yours. So we didn't go through COVID going, okay, we've got to find more business, we've got to make money. We looked at, okay, what are people going to need help with? And we're there to fill that gap. That will get you through. Know your audience and know your point of difference. So we're really clear on who we work with, what we provide that other event management companies don't. So it's really knowing yourself, but knowing your clients. Once again, I can remember getting emails from restaurants saying, book now, we're going to be open, when you clearly knew they weren't going to be reopened, who were completely misreading the market. So we constantly looked at research around what the consumer sentiment was about coming back. If we had gone out and said, events should be back, we would have been completely misreading the landscape. So really know your clients, know why you're doing it, and know what your clients' problems are that you're there to solve, and the rest will come. But if you're there just to make money and because you want to do it, you're going to miss the mark. So it's about finding what's that challenge, what's that problem that your clients have that you're going to provide the solution to.
It's funny.
And I remember seeing it.
It's funny you should say that. Two other guests I've had, Jamie Lingham, who runs Absolute Immigration. That obviously didn't go too well with lockdown. And another guy, Martin Toogood, who's a self-made entrepreneur, developer. Both echo the same sentiments. The money will follow. But if you're, as Marty said, if you're worried about if you're going to get penalties on this day or if you're going to get that or this, he said, you've got no chance. Whereas, as you say, it will come, but you've got to put in the hard work and not work for the dollars to start with.
Yeah. And not be precious, you know. I mean, I went back, I took a temp job, you know, a casual job at the tennis that I did in uni, you know, 25 years ago. Maybe not quite that long ago, but a long time ago. You know, I didn't care about going back and working with, you know, straight out of school kids. So I was going to try, you know, if it meant I was temping, I wasn't going to say, well, I've got all this experience. You just took what you could get, but you learn from each of those too. So I think it's, you know, having that agile mindset. And the other thing I would say is being curious. And I always say that this is, and I mean, I'm not the only one that says that. To me, curiosity is the biggest soft skill you can have. You know, we were constantly curious about research, about what was happening overseas, about new trends. And, you know, if someone works with me and they're not constantly asking questions, I'm concerned. So I think as a business owner, you should constantly be curious of not only your industry, but other industries, because that will help you stay ahead of the game and also look ahead. And I remember hearing it referred to, I think it was at a McCrindle maybe research thing about the drone view. So, you know, I'm quite aware that we could be disrupted again if the financial situation changes, you know, I won't say the R word, but, you know, things will change again for us. But I've spoken to people in the industry who said, no, it'll never change again. We just can't, it just can't happen, you know, and I'm so scared for them because they're just not prepared that we will be disrupted by something else again and again and again. And we've been a pretty lucky industry that hasn't been disrupted. So you've got to constantly be, you know, have that drone view of looking else, not only in your industry, but what's happening in the world that could impact you as well. Supply chains, you know, I know things happening overseas have impacted prices, which obviously then impact budgets for people running events. So you've got to be looking at everything, just not in your little bubble.
What's coming up for fetching events? We're coming into spring and summer and Australia, Melbourne, love a good event. What's coming up?
We do love a good event. What's coming up? We've got, we work with, as I said, a lot of community groups. So we've got some conferences. We've got a conference in Sydney at the end of the month for the peak body for neighbourhood and settlement houses in New South Wales. We run graduations for Endeavour College of Natural Health. So we'll be going around Australia with those. We've got some fundraising dinners. And then, as I said, we start getting into planning for next year. So bizarrely for us, we find the first half of the year is pretty busy. This year, we ran Sleep at the G. We ran the CEO Sleep Out in Melbourne. I said we had Bastille Day. We never thought we would be in the business of running sleep out events. And suddenly, you know, we got 2 in 1 year. So you just never know where your next event might come from.
So get up, keep going, fall down, get up, keep going, fall down and repeat.
Exactly. And I think it's not even looking at it that fall down. It's part of the ride. And it's just going to happen whether, you know, I mean, I've had quiet times where we didn't have COVID, but it just happened to be quiet. So, yeah, you just keep going. You just literally put one foot in front of the other. But if you love what you do and you put in the hard work, and it is hard work, you know, these jobs haven't fallen into our laps. We worked our butts off. But maintain good relationships, do what you love and your passion comes through. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing I can say. And it's that, you know, I think it's Steve Jobs that says that, you know, do a job that you love and it really pays off because your clients see your passion for it. It keeps your energy going because you believe in what you do. I've been on this great holiday, but I'm busting to get back into the office. Every day I wanted to get up and go to my desk, even though, my mental health might not have been great during those years. That's what's kept me going, is doing a job I believe in and I love. And as we said before, if you do that and if you're focused on your audience and your clients, the rest will follow.
Where can people have a look at your business, either to hire you or to have a look at your business and use it as a bit of a role model? What's your website and your Insta?
What the fuck is our Insta? I think it's Fetching Events Communications. Isn't that terrible? Or one word. Our website is fetchingevents.com.au. It is having a bit of a makeover, so bear with us. Or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. So Georgie Stayches. We'd love to chat to people who might be going through, starting a new business or going through some tough times. We certainly lent on our networks during this time, and I'd ring other small business owners going, "Oh my God, can I just have a vent to you?" I think that's another thing when we talked about this is communication, and I think as a small business owner, you've got to be really clear in your communication, even to family and friends. And I remember one day coming home venting about something to my partner, and he very wisely said, "Do you want me to just listen or do you want a solution?" And I went, "Oh, yes, no, I just need you to listen, And I think sometimes we don't tell people. So now I'm very good going, I just need to vent. Just let me, you don't need to solve it. Just let me say this. And it is really important because as a business owner, it can be really lonely. Not everyone understands what it's like. Yes, people often say, "Oh, you're your own boss." And I'm like, "No, I'm not. My clients are my boss," or people will say, "Oh, I don't know how you have the motivation to go in each day." It's like, well, if I don't get paid,
Yeah.
But finding that network of people who you can talk to, who understand what it's like, that you're the IT manager, you've got to work out your tax, you've got to be finding your next client, all those kind of things. That's really important for small businesses too. Find your little network that you can lean on when you need to.
Georgie Stayches, thanks for joining the Bare Facts today. You are an extraordinary person and your business success is extraordinary. And the situation you and many people were presented with 3 years ago, that wasn't extraordinary. That was shithouse. But thank you for sharing with us how you survived it and how you got through it and how you're now thriving.
Thank you for having me.